Hey everybody, and welcome back to Front-End Expert. In this video, we will be discussing some debugging strategies specific to JavaScript. So here in this HTML file, all we have is a div with the ID of circle that is creating that red circle in the output, and then we have a button that says move right. And if we come over to the CSS, you can see we just have some CSS for the circle. This is simply to make it visible, as well as we have position relative, and what we are trying to do is to use the fact that this is position relative, and every time we click the move right button, it moves the circle a little bit over to the right, so it adds to the left value. And then if we come over to the debugging strategies.js file, you can see how we tried to implement this. So first of all, we select the button, and then we add a click event handler to it. Inside of the click event handler, we first get the circle, and then we get the computed style of the circle, and we get the left value of it using destructuring. And finally, we set the style.left equal to the previous left value plus 10. Now this might seem like it should work. However, if we click on the move right button, nothing is going to happen, it's not working. Okay, so now how can we debug this? How do we try to figure out what is wrong? Well, the first thing you might want to do is to look at the console. We want to check, is there any error message showing up in the console? And right now we don't have any, so that's not going to help us. So then we need to try to find a way to track through the code to see what different things are doing to try to find where the error is. And there are many ways to do that, and we will show a few of the more common options here. So let's start with console logging. This is probably the most simple way to debug your code, but it is actually pretty powerful. Additionally, if you're in an interview, it might be the only option you have depending on the coding environment that they're having you work in. Okay, so let's try to follow the code and find the error. So we can come over to the JS file, and let's start by logging out the button to make sure that we are selecting the correct button to add the event listener to. So we can say console.log button. We can save this, and you can see we are logging out the button. It says button move right, which is what we expect. Okay, so next we need to check, does this add event listener line work? So I'm going to delete this line here, and we can come into the move right function, and let's just check that we get here. So we can simply say console.log here, just to make sure that we are getting this far into the code. And as we expect, we don't log anything immediately, which is good. And if I click on the move right button, you can see we log out here, which is what we want. Now you can continue to do this line by line, or if you do know where the end of the function is that you are trying to debug, then what you can do is jump around that function to areas that you think might be problematic, which can be more efficient than adding logs after every single line. So let's delete this. And what I want to check is that we are correctly getting the left value. So what I'm going to do is say console.log and to log out left. We can save this, and we can click on the button once again, and you see we log out the string 0px. And now the bug is probably pretty obvious. What are we doing with the left value? Well, we do left plus 10. So what is 0 pixels? So the string 0px plus 10. Well, it is going to give you the string 0px10, and that isn't what we want. What we want is to get the string 10 pixels. So then how can we fix this? Well, we know that we need to actually add to the value here. We don't want to concatenate, so we can start by parsing this as an integer. So we can say parse int, and we will parse an integer of left. So now we have the correct number, but then we need to add the pixels at the end and to make it a string. So we can do this simply by concatenating the string of px. And now if I save this, we can come back over to the browser, click on move right, and you can see it is working. And the final thing you will want to make sure to do is to simply remove the console log. So I can remove this console log of left, and we would now have a working solution. Okay, but I'm going to put this back how it was, and let's see a few other ways that we could have debugged this problem. So we can remove the solution here, and we will go back to how we had it before. Okay, so next I want to show a slightly more efficient way to do essentially the same thing that we just did, and that's going to be with the debugger statement. So I'm going to come back to the top of the move right function, and we can add a debugger statement. Now the debugger statement will have a different effect based on what environment you are running your code in. For example, in Chrome, if you have the dev tools open, it will open up a debugger. But then in some other environments, it actually won't do anything at all. It will just be ignored if there is no debugger available. But anyways, let's see how we can use this with Chrome. So I'm going to save this, and we can once again click on the Move Right button. And it opened up this Sources tab where we can see debugging strategies.js. And now on the right side here, you can see a lot of useful information. First of all, you can see the scope, so you can see what values all of the variables are set equal to at this point in time. So currently the this keyword is set to be the button, and we have circle and left are still undefined because we haven't gotten to those lines in the function yet. And now this debugger works just like a debugger you might have used in another language. So up here we have some options of how we can move through the code. So first of all, we have this play button, which is just going to resume execution. And then next we have the step over the next function call button, as well as we have the step into the next function call button. And then lastly, we also have the step out of the current function call, as well as we have the simple step button. So for now, I will simply click on step, and you can see we are at the next line of code, and we are now calling document.getElementById of the circle. So we can step through this, and you can see that now the circle is set to be this div with the ID of circle, which is what we want. So we can continue stepping. And now we have the left value is set to be the string of 0 pixels. And seeing this value should get us to the same point as before. We should notice that we aren't using the operators correctly with the string because adding 10 to 0 pixels isn't going to work. A few other useful things you can do here is you can hover over these values here. So for example, I can hover over circle.style.left, which is currently an empty string. The reason this is an empty string is because the left value has not been set on this element yet, as well as we can hover over left here, which we can see is the string of 0 pixels. So this came from computed style rather than style.left, which is just empty string still. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this code out, and then I'm going to come back over to the JavaScript, and let's just remove this debugger statement. Okay, so next, what I want to show is how we can debug this if we had a more complex JavaScript file. So what if this file was thousands of lines long, and there's an argument to be made that you shouldn't have JavaScript files that long, but if you did, how could you go about debugging it? Well, you probably wouldn't know where this click event handler was, and it could take a while to find it. So what we can do instead is come over to the browser, and we can come to the Event Listener Breakpoints section on the right side of the Sources tab. And we can open this up, and we can see different types of event listeners. And we're interested in mouse events, so we can open up this, and we can click on the click event here. So essentially, this is going to add a breakpoint, which is going to pause the code just like the debugger statement did whenever we enter a click event handler. So let's come back up here, and we can click on Move Right, and you can see we are essentially where we were before. So we found the function without having to do anything in the JavaScript. And now additionally, if this function was much longer than it is here, and we knew that we just wanted to get to the end to see what all of the different values were, we can actually add a breakpoint manually. So we can click on any of these line numbers, and this will add a breakpoint. So we added a breakpoint to line 8, and we could run the code now, and it will stop at the next breakpoint. So we skipped all the way down to the next breakpoint, and we can scroll up over here, and we can see all of these different values. So a lot of times, this is what I like to do, is just add a breakpoint at the end of the function, and make sure that all of the different identifiers are set to the values that I expect them to be. Okay, so that's really all there is to JavaScript-specific debugging strategies. One other tab I did want to highlight in the Chrome DevTools, though, is going to be the Network tab. So I'm going to move over to the Network tab, and this is going to show all of the network requests that were made. So in this case, we requested the HTML file, the CSS file, and the JavaScript file. The WS is a WebSocket that I'm using for the videos to not have to refresh the page, but don't worry about that one too much. And you can see with each of these different requests what their type was, what the status code that came back was, how large they were, how long they took, as well as if we open them up, we can see even more information about them. So for example, you can see the JavaScript file when we requested it returned a status code of 200, which is okay. And then we could also maybe open up the preview and see the actual contents of the file. And while pretty much all of your debugging will happen in the console or the sources tab, I did want to quickly show the network tab, as if you are debugging a network request, such as one created by calling fetch, then you might need to use the network tab to make sure that you are making that network request when you expect, and you can check to see what values came back, what the headers were, and so on and so forth. Okay, so with that, that's going to be the end of this video on debugging strategies within JavaScript. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something new. I'll see you in the next one.